This is Rock and Roll English. Real people, real English. Here's your host, Martin Johnston.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Rock and Roll English. Episode number 254, baby. Oh yeah, you may notice I am kind of whispering. This is because I'm recording this very, very late because I kind of forgot about it. It's Sunday night and then I thought, fuck, I need to give the Rock and Rollers a podcast tomorrow. And this is a podcast that I recorded, I think, in November with Cara from Leo Listening. Okay, she has been on the podcast before quite a long time ago, so it's a kind of refresher, I suppose, about how you can use films to help you improve your listening skills. We also talk about learning in a community, the difference between active study and passive study. We mention a few different films and talk about them, some classics like Home Alone, My Girl, and ones like this. And I also share what I think is a bloody hilarious story about RoboCop. Do you know that? Do you know that film, RoboCop? Well, wait for my rock and roll story about RoboCop, okay? And enjoy the episode, and I will talk to you quickly at the end. Happy listening. So, hello, Cara, and welcome back to Rock and Roll English.
Hi, Martin. Very happy to be here.
Very happy to have you here. Is this the second or the third time you've been on?
I want to say it's the second.
Yeah, because I thought if it were the third, then there's a special treat, but we'll have to save that for next time.
Oh, okay. Oh,
there's actually not. I just made that up. But
I was getting all distracted imagining what it might be, you know?
Yeah, but I think there should be, though, so maybe
a prize.
Maybe I'll work on that. But for the people that don't remember you, Cara, tell us who you are, what you do.
All right, I can do that. So I'm Cara Leopold. I run the website leolistening.com, where I help adventurous expats and intrepid travellers connect in English through movies. Mm-hmm. What else can I say? I'm from Scotland, so this is why my accent sounds a bit Scottish, even though I haven't lived in Scotland since 1997. Can you believe that?
Oof. Wow,
since
that's a long time ago.
A million years, yeah. And now I live in France.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Very nice. Since 1997. I thought I had lived abroad for a long time, since 2010, but that makes me feel a bit better, actually.
Oh, really? I've lived in France since 2007, but I suppose you could argue the in-between period was living in England, which is technically abroad if you are a Scottish person.
Absolutely. Yeah, of course. You mentioned how you help people, or especially understand films, and you have like a community. Now, obviously, the whole thing about community, I saw on your website you say movies are better together.
Yeah.
So tell us why.
Well, yeah, this is the thing. So I think a lot of us and a lot of people here from maybe someone was just telling me about this yesterday. She's in a Facebook group for German people learning English, and some people ask for advice on learning, and there's always somebody who writes back. I think this must happen in every single English learning group across the internet. Somebody always says, just watch movies, right? And then so many of us have attempted this and it didn't work out so great. So I've done this for various languages. I've tried watching movies and I've been sort of frustrated or bored or, because it's been too hard for me, or I probably could have done it, but I needed help. And actually the one of the best times that I watched a movie when my French wasn't so good was with a teacher, and she would like pause it at the bits that she knew were difficult for me and the other person in the class. And it was great. I was like, wow, I just understood like 10 times more because I had somebody who knew what I was struggling with. And, like she was laughing her head off and we were just like confused. But then she paused it and she explained and it was fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've definitely been there of the, in a room watching a film together. For example, when I've watched a film in Italian and everyone laughs, and then I'm there silent and thinking, what was that joke again?
It's painful, isn't it? And like,
it is.
I don't really have that problem so much in like French now, because I've watched a lot of movies and TV, and so it's a bit easier. But it's true that like, for a long time, that kind of thing is really tricky, jokes and stuff. So there's the thing of like, like movies are hard to understand, and that is just a thing. And I think they can be harder than... I'm reading a book about teaching listening at the moment. And
so am I, actually. That's
are you? Which one are you? Which one are you reading?
It's got a really difficult title of How to Teach Listening.
Oh, okay.
That's what it's called. I can't remember who wrote it.
Because there's Listening in the Language Classroom. That's by Field. So I don't think it's that one, because it's a different title. Right now I'm just trying to think of famous books about teaching listening. So I'm reading one called Breaking the Sound Barrier. It's quite good, isn't it? Oh,
right. Okay. That sounds much better than mine.
Well, it sounds it sounds fancy, but it's not quite as fancy. But they make the point in the book, it's more aimed at like secondary school language teachers. And they make the point that, like, you know, in class, we make people listen to recordings. Whereas in real life, in fact, a lot of listening is actually interpersonal. So usually you have the person in front of you. You can see like their lips moving and their body language, and they can like repeat stuff for you and paraphrase. And movies, you know, you are kind of like, you are watching people, you're observing, but you're not part of the conversation. You're kind of like, it's almost like you're spying on a conversation. So nobody's going to stop and reformulate or anything. So it is harder than real life. So you definitely need help with the part. But then the other side of Movies Are Better Together is, you know, I have been running my community for a while now, my movie club. And I think the best part of watching movies is when we do it together and when we share our opinions on the movie and we talk about the movie, because you just get so much more out of it when you share with others and you hear their perspective.
Absolutely. And
it's also a great way to talk in English.
Yeah.
Something to talk about.
Of course, yeah. On the point of movies, though, because when I think about watching movies in a foreign language, especially, I think it's a long time to concentrate. Sometimes.
Oh yeah.
So I normally prefer to go for a series. So why movies?
Well, yeah, I've thought about this because I know other teachers running kind of like movie clubs, and some of them are doing series clubs, and I've thought about that as well. I've thought about using maybe like a mini series. You know, some series are just like 3, 4, 5, 6 episodes and that's it.
Yeah.
But what I like about a movie is well, what we do actually to counter the problem that you mentioned is that we pick one movie and we work on it for a month.
Right.
So we get, so like this is something. So one time I was on Luke's English podcast, just name dropping the famous podcast that I've been on. Obviously yours is the most famous, and
of course,
just flattering you now. Anyway, so I was on Luke's English podcast sharing all my listening skills secrets. And then he says to me, yeah, but most English learners won't do this. And I was just like, well, thanks, mate. Because I was talking about, you know, the fact that if you really want to use movies and TV series to improve your English, you're going to have to, you know, listen to things again, do dictations, repeat after the characters, you know, all this stuff that you don't really want to do when you're just sitting in front of the TV.
Sure.
So, so basically what I do is I like tell my students to do this sort of stuff. But I mean, because they like movies, they don't mind going back and like working on specific clips from the movie. Because like you say, when you just watch it superficially, you don't remember all the different parts. I mean, it's 2 hours. It's a long time to concentrate in any language. But then, when you do clips, you notice all this stuff you haven't noticed before. And what I love the most is I usually get the clips from YouTube. And when you go in the comments, like some people have amazing insights in the comments. I'm just like, wow, people are really thoughtful and perceptive. And
the comments are always good to read, because then you also get the ridiculous ones as well, which are always entertaining. But another thing about movies, which I noticed recently, because I watched something with my wife in English, and one of the other, I think, important things, well, maybe not so important, but difficult, is going back to what we said earlier about understanding jokes as well, sometimes there's like a cultural reference which you just don't understand. So I even remember this when I was a child, watching many American things, and they were talking about American people that were famous, and you think, I don't know who that is. So obviously, so that is another sometimes problem that I think actually maybe in movies less so, but certainly I think in TV series
are probably
often get that.
Are probably worse. Yesterday I was just thinking about Gilmore Girls. Have you ever watched that?
I haven't. No.
Okay, it's on Italian TV apparently. I have it on Good Word from a lot of my students are Italian, so and I did a little free challenge for my newsletter subscribers over the summer, and it was watching clips from Gilmore Girls. But yeah, they are really hard, and it's another reason why as a teacher I wouldn't really work on that, because it would just be exhausting for me, because you have to look up all the cultural references. And in fact, I actually found out when I was doing some research for that challenge that apparently there were Gilmore Girls DVDs that actually came with these little booklets inside that explained the references, because there's a lot of references to like old movies and
wow, that's just what you want for, isn't it, to have to study before
to be able to. I mean, I think that was for like the super fans who appreciated that kind of stuff, but yeah, if you're just a casual viewer, it is quite hard. And there was even stuff like, they would always talk about this guy called Paul Anka, who is like an old-timey singer, crooner type guy. And I never understood when they would say that name, Paul Anka. So they would link it, Paul Anka. And I was like, what's Paul Anka? Paul Anka. Like, I didn't register that was a person's name even. And I'm a native English speaker. I didn't even know they were talking about some, Frank Sinatra type guy. It was so confusing. It's so confusing. It's a great series, but it can be confusing sometimes.
Right, okay, wow. But yeah, having like a booklet to explain them. And that's something I wanted to mention, which you mentioned earlier as well. So when you said you spoke to Luke and he mentioned people wouldn't do that, I think that's the difference between active study and passive study, which I always say to actually improve your level, you're going to need to do both of those things. Like passive study, so like listening to podcasts, just like you said, watching a film without doing anything, that is good. But at some point, I think you need to put that into practice and actually do some kind of active study. So like you said, the activities you do, activities that we do in the Rock and Roll English family as well, to actually put these in practice. And that moves me nicely to the next point, actually, when I spoke about the Rock and Roll English family, because a big thing in the family is the community feel, and there's a real strong community there, which I think helps learning a lot, and I know you do too. So tell us why we should learn in community.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, it sort of makes perfect sense, doesn't it, for language learning? Because ultimately we are learning to be able to talk to people. I mean, I'm someone who, when I started learning French, I just thought it was interesting in and of itself. Like, I'm interested in languages. So like, I wasn't really bothered about talking to any French people at first. But then obviously it is very exciting the first time you are able to talk to them. You're like, wow, this is amazing. So obviously the whole point of language learning is ultimately to have that conversation with someone, connect with someone. So to me, it makes sense to do it together, to have people that you're talking with and talking about the language learning with.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I only noticed recently, I read this somewhere, like the root of the word, obviously, community and communicate is actually the same. And so that communicate is the goal, really, isn't it? To connect with people and So yeah, when you do that in a community, that obviously gives you much more chance to do that.
Yeah, well, and also I've just read this massive book called The Patterning Instinct, which is a big book it's a big cognitive history of humanity. It's a bit like Sapiens, sort of world history, but it goes into kind of how different cultures throughout history have kind of like made sense of the world. But it starts off talking about language and talking about the development of our prefrontal cortex, because that's the part of the brain that is able to like make meaning from the world. And it talks about how language, developed, but that's to do with humans always living together like in a sort of tribal community. We needed to talk to each other, and being able to talk to each other is how we've pretty much taken over the planet. Obviously, that's starting to become a bit of an issue now. But, but it made us, people make that point that, humans are obviously much slower and not as strong as many animals out there. But the point is that when we were able to like communicate with each other and make plans and organize, we could actually like be stronger together. And that's how we were able to survive in like quite hostile environments and eventually pretty much take over the world. So like, we've got a lot to thank language for. And so that totally makes sense. Like communicate and community. Like where do you communicate? Well, in your community. And, people are always moaning about like having no one to talk to, but you just have to go out and find your community, my people like talking about movies, your people like talking about the podcast.
Yeah, exactly. And then you can take over the world.
You can, you and your community. You will take over the world eventually if you just keep discussing. But it's nice to I realize that with some of my students, I don't even know sort of because we don't really do small talk type stuff. Well, we do a little bit, but some of them I don't really know sort of, I know a bit about their lives. I know enough, but our main focus is kind of discussing the movies and stuff to do with that, and some kind of deep topics that are a bit more than just the normal small talk. So that kind of makes it more interesting, sometimes as a teacher I get fed up of talking about the weather with multiple people or talking about what they did at the weekend kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I agree. It can be very boring as well. That's why as well in the Rock and Roll English family we talk a lot about stories to share, stories of stupid things that have happened to you, as opposed to the usual things of what the weather's like and how many people are in your family. Which often the classic things you get asked. And another thing I think actually is when you have a community and someone's leading it, you can have more structured conversations, because otherwise very often you might end up having the same conversation with people.
That's true.
So when you meet someone for the first time, for example, you obviously say hello, where are you from, what do you do? This actually, when I moved to Italy, I had that conversation, oh my God, about a million times in the first maybe 2 to 3 years I was here. And that's often the case. But then, like you said, if you've got a specific topic to talk about, and maybe some pre-prepared questions and stuff like that, you're having more of a structured conversation, and that gives you more of an opportunity to use new language, new structures. Otherwise you're just constantly saying the same things, repeating the same.
I mean, probably having that basic conversation over and over is good at the beginning. You perfect it, but then obviously you want to move on at some point, and that can be the hard thing. So but definitely for the movie club it does revolve around a lot of questions. Movies in general, there's stuff on my website about that where I've suggested questions to have a sort of deep and meaningful conversation. But even sometimes seemingly superficial conversations about movies, if you just start off with did you like it, that can actually go pretty far, that discussion.
Absolutely. So and obviously movies about different topics, so that brings in new vocabulary and stuff like that. So then that obviously helps you to improve, because I told this story recently actually on a seminar I did. A friend of mine who works at a hotel here in Italy, when I first met him I thought his English was amazing, but then I realised he only knows how to say the really to welcome people in a hotel pretty much. His but job. Then if you try and talk about anything else, because he does that all day at work of hi, here's your keys, here's your room, he does that really, really well, with even the pronunciation was almost perfect. But then if you try to talk about other things, he gets very stuck very quickly. So that's why it's important to sometimes have a bit of structure in the conversation to try and push you to talk about new things, use new vocabulary,
exactly.
new grammar structures. So speaking of the different types of movies, so for example, which ones would you recommend, or which movies have you seen in the movie club, for example, that have had a big impact on you?
Oof. Well, I was just looking back at the ones from this year because, well, in fact, we're pretty much at the end of the year now. We've planned which movie we're going to watch next month, and that's going to be our last one. I think recently we've actually been working with a theme, which has really helped for choosing the movies and also for our discussions, because when you pick movies from the same theme, you can kind of compare them. So that adds an extra layer.
Right.
So one we watched in September was RoboCop.
Oh, what a film.
Oh, have you seen it? Okay, because I was like, oh man,
Well,
Martin doesn't like films. How are we going to...
Yeah, I mean, I say what a film because I remember I was obsessed with that when I was a child. And I don't think I've seen it in about 30 years, but I have seen the original. Maybe there's a new one now. I don't even know.
So that's really interesting that you talk about being a kid, because one of the things on the comments on YouTube was people talking about how traumatized they are by this movie because they saw it as a kid.
Right.
But in fact, the merchandising for the movie was aimed at kids. Like, they had like RoboCop toys.
Yeah.
And you're just like, this is...
I had RoboCop everything.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
But it's not a kids'
it.
movie. I just want to say, you're not going to sit down with your daughter. Well, she probably wouldn't understand anything, but I mean, it's really not. I mean, like, it's for, if you want to be traumatized as a kid, then you could watch this. But if you watch it as an adult, you will see that it superficially it looks like an action movie, just a dumb action movie. And one of my students was like, "Oh my God, Cara, what are we watching?" But then as she got into it, she realized that it's actually a very profound movie. With a lot of questions, and my favorite comment on YouTube was, "This is the greatest movie ever about what it means to be human." Despite the fact, I know that's deep. I was like, oh my God, this person is a genius. I'm stealing that. This is despite the fact that this is about a police officer killed in the line of duty who is resurrected as a crime-fighting cyborg by this unethical, evil corporation. And they think they've wiped his memory, but then he's like, memories of when he was human start coming back. And it's just such a good movie on so many levels. It's like you could talk about it forever because it's so deep. It's also very violent. It's also funny. So it's got everything.
I'll have to watch it again.
Definitely.
There has only been one made, or have there been others?
Right, so let me speak to this. So there is a terrible remake from... It was 2014, I think. So if you're searching for it, make sure you look for RoboCop 1987, and not the. Apparently, the remake was completely pointless, completely missed the point of the original movie. So avoid that. And there were sequels. There's a RoboCop 2, definitely. There may even be a RoboCop 3. I've not seen the sequels. I'm not really interested in them.
Yeah, never the same, are they?
No, I don't see how you could do better than that original movie.
Speaking of, though, you said how it's so profound. I just have to share this profound thing connected to RoboCop, which is ridiculous and also disgusting, but also I think genius at the same time. You know, on stag do's, some people have like names on the back of their shirts. I always know to avoid those people, like in airports or something. Of course, run away. Absolutely. As soon as you see them, you think, oh my God. And I was on the tube in London once, and they were all like sitting in front of me. And then when they got up, I saw all of the names on the back of their shirt, and they were all ridiculous. But one of them, which I thought was genius, was RoboCock, which I thought was absolutely brilliant. Speaking of profound things, obviously that guy that put RoboCock on the back of his t-shirt as well, I'm sure he was affected by the film.
Exactly. It just shows you the power of this movie. It's sort of penetrated the consciousness of every person on the planet, presumably.
Absolutely. Okay, so that's one that you would recommend. Any others that have had a big impact on you for people to watch?
Any others? One that surprised me that I didn't think I was going to like was, so this was a bit random. In May, we watched My Girl, which is...
now that is a great film. Now that really is a great film. I think the only film I've actually ever cried.
Really? It is bloody sad. It's...
Well, I mean, again, I was a child. I was probably about 8 or something like that. But oh God, when he dies.
Spoiler.
Sorry.
Well, we have a lot of clues, because it's about a young girl whose dad is an undertaker. So she's kind of surrounded by death every day, and her mother died when she was born. So it's a lot. So it's actually, I think it's a very clever movie because it is actually also a comedy, quite a light movie, and then it also deals with this heavy subject of death. So I think it's really clever how it does that, because obviously nobody likes talking about death, or but this here we've got a little girl who's kind of obsessed with it. So it's, she's a hypochondriac, and it doesn't help that her dad runs the undertaking business out of their house. So because we were talking about this, one of my French students was like, I don't think you'd be allowed to do that in France. I think there's rules that would prevent you from kind of embalming bodies in your basement. But yeah, that was very clever. And we were talking as well about the series 6 Feet Under, because that's also about a family of undertakers.
Was this the same theme when you were doing the month then?
No, thank God. I couldn't have handled. No, we didn't have a theme. That was just a random suggestion,
right,
but it turned out to be a really good one.
It was connected, yeah. I can't as well not talk about, speaking of My Girl, not talk about the song as well from The Temptations, My Girl. What a great song that is. That's in the film, isn't it?
It's like, but I think it's like
you were quiet for a minute. I was thinking that's in the film.
No, it isn't.
I'm pretty sure.
It isn't the film. I think it's right at the end. I was just going to say, I grew up listening to quite a lot of Motown music, so that was the kind of thing. But yeah, the movie is famous for that, and Macaulay Culkin is in the movie, and he's just so cute. I mean, he is peak cuteness. He's absolutely adorable.
That's kind of before he went off the rails. When you go off the rails, you go a bit crazy.
It's been, I think, being a child, but he was so insanely famous. I mean, I don't think it's healthy for a kid, but he was absolutely adorable, So if you want some peak Macaulay Culkin, that's kind of like the height of his fame, sort of My Girl, Home Alone, that kind of period.
Absolutely. Another great film there, Home Alone. That's the only one as well where I think the sequel has been also very good, because normally the second one, it's very rarely good, and then I think they made a 3 and a 4 without him, Macaulay Culkin,
with other kids,
and total disaster. But otherwise was actually quite good. And I remember he had that voice recorder thing, didn't he, in the second one, to record. I can't remember actually even what it's called, and I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. Maybe that's why I started podcasting.
It could be. I don't remember number 2 as well as number 1, but I want to say that in number 2 was Donald Trump.
They went to New York.
I think Donald Trump was briefly in number 2, but if you can sort of ignore that, it's very brief. It's very brief.
Very brief. It's
Thank
a
God.
matter of seconds. Yeah. He sees him in the hotel.
Yeah.
Which I obviously didn't remember at the time. I've since seen that on YouTube. But yeah. Okay, Cara, well, thanks for sharing all of this. Tell us where we can find out more about you.
So the best place to go is leo-listening.com, or just type those 2 words into Google, Leo, Leo, and then listening, like the language skill. So you can go to my website. That's where you can download my free guide called Understand Movies in English. Well, I will show you how to understand part of one of my favorite movies in English, and then how you can do it yourself. Unless you're, you're like Luke from Luke's English podcast and you go, I can't be bothered. And then you can also find me on YouTube. So I think, again, if you type Leo Listening into the internet, it will probably come up with YouTube.
I'll put all of this, all links to this in the show notes.
All links to everything, yeah.
Yes. Okay, well, thanks a lot, Cara. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and we'll see you soon.
All right, thanks, Martin.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, so that was me talking to Cara about listening and films and lots of other stuff. I explained that really well, didn't I? We were talking about lots of stuff. For example, RoboCop. Did you hear that? Did you enjoy it? I still piss myself laughing when I think of that moment, just seeing RoboCop. I would love to meet that man and just say, well, just to shake his hand and say, you are a genius. So if you're listening, please get in contact. Anyway, remember, I will put all of the notes to the episode and to all Cara's stuff on the website, so you can find all the show notes there, rockandrollenglish.com/episode 254. I will see you all very soon, people, but in the meantime, just keep on rocking, baby.
Thanks so much for listening to Rock and Roll English. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit rockandrollenglish.com and facebook.com/rockandrollenglish. We'll catch you next time.